What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the MLB series previews. I believe this is number 8. Going on that, talking about the series going into the weekend, which I think are obviously the most important episodes to do because we have no BTL. So you want to hear my thoughts, have some kind of preparation, helps me as much as it helps you going into the weekend. So I'm pretty excited to do that. We've been having a pretty good week in BTL. Fingers crossed. Let's keep that rolling into these weekend series. We definitely have a couple of sets of like really good games. So don't want to waste too much time. Can get right into this. First up, we have the Twins at Pirates, which the Twins actually ended up being squad red today. W's there. It was a surprising vote. But the reason for that would be in game one, I don't really like Mitch Keller, and Keller's been absolutely fantastic lately. We're getting a matchup here with him against Joe Ryan. Keller's been great, but all things have to come to an end. If you look at what he's been doing his last couple starts, like he's gotten a little fortunate, sure, but the Twins post, I think, a vastly different matchup than really any other team because the Twins, one of the couple times, I guess, where I bet them or a couple of situations is when they face a pitcher where they struggle a little bit if you have like a stack of lefties or if you have guys that can get the ball in the air. When like you look at what Mitch Keller has been doing, really as of lately, like again, he's been very, very solid. But I mean, he loves to keep the ball on the ground, which has been his kind of calling card. That's been, I guess, the last couple of starts what's kept him so good. But when he like faces a lineup full of guys that can put the ball in the air, he hasn't been able to do that. So the Twins are like the perfect example of a lineup that has, lefties, which he struggles against, guys who can put the ball in the air a lot, which he struggles against, good hitting conditions in Pittsburgh as well. And then you also talk about the bullpen, which I can physically show you here. The Dodgers -1.5 was, my favorite play yesterday, squad ride yesterday. And these bullpen arms for the Pirates are taxed. We saw them go through a bunch of them on Wednesday. They did it more in bulk, I guess, yesterday because the game was out of reach for a majority of it. After the Dodgers went up, 6 runs, Bailey Falter didn't give them anything in that game. He was terrible. So, I mean, you're going to see a couple of these guys. Like maybe you'll see Holderman for a little longer. Who knows? He did pitch 2 the last 3 days. Maybe you'll see Stratton, but, the Pirates bullpen is already bad. You're getting into a pretty tired bullpen that's gotten a lot of workload. So, I think Mitch Keller has a little bit of trouble too. And if it ends up being that you need some runs for the Twins off of that bullpen, that's perfectly fine by me because they're not in a great situation or have a great matchup there. So yeah, I like Joe Ryan in this matchup. No secret. Like the Pirates, as of late, have been really good against lefties. I guess one of the only times they've been decent is against Walker Buehler yesterday against a righty. So they definitely profile a lot better against lefties than they do righties, especially ones that match up like this. So I like Joe Ryan in this matchup. I don't love him necessarily. But I do really, really like the Twins bats to get to Mitch Keller, one of the first teams to do that in a while, hopefully. Rest of the series, not too much. Definitely, I would say a high strikeout upside for Jared Jones come Sunday. It's probably going to be a pretty popular take there, but he's been good. I guess the strikeout stuff is kind of dipped off, kind of not really. If you look at just pure numbers, like he's had tougher matchups as of recent. So, like on paper, yeah, the strikeout stuff hasn't really been there as much, but he benefited from a lot of really good matchups, like to start his career when he first came up. So, I think you're going to see that kind of flatten out, and you'll find like a happy medium of the two. Against the Twins, the upside is certainly there come game 3. So, I do not mind any K lines for him there, and just in general, Bailey Ober, even though he is a righty, I don't love taking those against the Pirates right now or fading them against the Pirates right now. He's been very bad. So I think he can match up pretty poorly against that lineup and they can score some runs. Don't know yet who's going against Woods Richardson in game 2. Kind of keeps me off there, but definitely am on the Twins game 1. Probably going to be on something Jared Jones in game 3. That would probably be a majority of my thoughts. Don't really have much thoughts about this Brewers Tigers series. A lot of that has to do with the pitching situation for the Brewers. We just finally got Tobias Myers announced for game 1. And, the game's about to start in 5 or so hours. Maybe by the time you see this, the starters will be out for the Brewers for game 2 or game 3, or at least we'll have some kind of idea. But I don't really know. I assume you're getting Freddie Peralta one of those 2 games. I don't know what rest they want to keep him on. Freddie Peralta could absolutely dice the Tigers if that ends up being the case. But, I mean, man, I would love to see a Peralta Skubal matchup, but it's a conversation for another day. I do think, Peralta and Skubal, for what it's worth, they match up well against anybody, but really like those matchups against both those 2 teams. Maybe the strikeout upside may not be there for Skubal quite yet in that matchup, but I think he has a pretty strong start. We're rooting for Goat Whales there, but yeah, unfortunately, I wish I could give more on this series. I really can't because the Brewers don't have confirmed starters out just yet. So maybe a Reese Olson revenge game in game one. I'm not a Tobias Myers fan, but this Tigers lineup, it's really tough to find spots to back them lately because I don't know. They beat matchups, they sell on matchups. It's a big I don't know. It's so confusing what to do with them. So I'm still trying to figure them out as a lineup. They're bad, so I fade them, but there are certain spots where they can be successful. Just very inconsistent as far as finding those matchups lately. So I'll move on from that series. I'm just yapping at this point, but I do like a little more of something in the Braves Nationals series. Chris Sale is going up in what hopefully is a bounce back start for him after he got absolutely shelled by the A's in what was pretty clearly his worst start of the season. The A's have been tough, pesky against a lot of teams lately. The Mariners pitching staff kind of stuffed them in the locker, but the Mariners pitching staff does that to really everybody. That series was super low scoring. But they touched up Chris Sale. Like I said, worst start of the year. A lot of people were on him then. A lot of people are going to be on him today because the Nationals have been one of the worst teams in all of baseball against left-handed pitching. I think I've brought it up a million times, and I'm going to continue to do so because as much as I love backing the Nationals because I find my spots with them. I've talked about it, which funny enough, they do face Morton in game 2. So maybe a little foreshadowing there, but I find my spots with them. They've been pretty good to me, respecting my coin, but one of the spots I've also done it is fading them when they play left-handed pitchers. So down here is them against left-handed pitchers. This is 78 WRC plus the entire year, kind of around the same as we talked about like the last month or so as well. So not very good. They've been pitiful. Weird to see that after how good they were against lefties last year. Vastly different lineup, very aware, but still just crazy to think about. So Sale, if there's any time for him to have a bounce back outing, it's got to be today. Everybody's on him. Everybody's on a strikeout. So I wouldn't be surprised if, that was kind of cake and he just had an overall like really good start. But I would say just from a baseball perspective, numbers perspective, there's not many spots that line up better than Chris Sale against the Nationals today, except maybe Max Fried against the Nationals in game 3. Because, pretty much for the same exact reason. You like the strikeout upside probably a little more for Chris Sale than you do Max Fried. But Max Fried, whenever you have a team kind of down here that platoons is just a bad side against left-handed pitching, Max Fried's had his way with them, and that includes the Nationals first time around as well. So, yes, I don't love backing pitchers against offenses that you're seeing for the second time in a short time period or time span or whatever you want to call it. But I do make the exception for a couple of teams, and the Nationals and Braves just happen to be those teams. So, still be fading the Nats against left-handed pitchers. I'll still just be fading the Braves offense in general. So, for game 1, I do like this under between Chris Sale and Jake Irvin, which Jake Irvin, if you haven't got familiar, get familiar. He's been absolutely fantastic this season, along with, a couple of arms of the Nationals pitching staff. It's been absolutely fantastic. He's just been great. And that includes, a start against the Braves not too long ago as well. I think that was his last start. The Guardians since then. But yeah, 6 innings, 2 hits, 10 Ks, just best start of his career. Absolutely fantastic. That Braves offense is downright anemic right now. And it's not just because they lost Acuna. They're terrible before then. They got reinforcements in between Austin Riley and Sean Murphy, and they're still bad. And the one like saving grace for them, I guess, is when they face a lefty, even though their numbers against lefties haven't been nearly as good as they should be with the team that they have, but they are still, 11, nearly top 10 against lefties so far this season. So maybe that's something to look for Gore and DJ Hers, more so DJ Hers on Sunday. But yeah, I'm going to continue fading this Braves offense, and they got to show me something different. They scored a couple runs off of them in game 1, which a lot of that came off of the bullpen, but they just saw Mitchell Parker for the second time in a short time period in like a week and a half, and he took a no-hitter into the 6th inning. So expecting relatively the same from Jake Irvin, maybe not a no-hitter, but a pretty strong start. So I like the under. Charlie Morton does face the Nationals, which I talked about that last time they played. Love that matchup. The Nationals are at home where their offense is a little worse. So, I still do want to kind of stick with that. My one problem, if there's anybody who's going to make some sort of adjustments after he got hit up that bad by a team who I don't want to say they're bad offensively because they're not, but like if you make some slight adjustments, it can be very different, aka throw more fastballs to those guys instead of breaking balls. If there's anybody who's going to make those adjustments, it's a seasoned vet like Charlie Morton. So I'm not going to be going back with as much, excitement to the Nationals in that game too, but I do still think with McKenzie go on the bump, I don't think it's a bad idea. Maybe I'm a little less on the Nationals bats in that spot, just on them in general as a side. But my favorite play in this series would probably have to be right now, this under in game one. And then definitely going to back Fried in game three. Absolutely in that spot. So that's what I'll stick with for now. Can go back to these series because the next one up, I have plenty to say about Cole Irvin and Aaron Savali in game one of Orioles Rays. Now, the Rays took one, probably, took one they shouldn't have in the series in Baltimore. They were close to getting swept. They should have also won the first game, but that's a different conversation. That was the game where Aaron Savali had, I would say, the best start of his career, or not his career, his season with the Rays. He was lights out. Made some adjustments that I think really worked for him, so he's starting to lessen the home run issue. Still is not great against righties, so we'll see how that plays out in the Trop rather than, Orioles Park with that giant left field wall. But I think he can be okay. But the story for this game for me is 100% the Rays bats, which I have been just flat out complaining about this Rays lineup against left-handed pitching for the entirety of the season. And as of the last couple weeks, maybe they heard me. I don't know what it is. They're hitting really well. Even if you look at the last month against left-handed pitching, this is where they sit, which would be surprising to some. Sixth in the MLB with a 132 WRC plus. That is nothing to scoff about. So they're learning how to hit lefties, and not only any lefties, but Cole Irvin specifically. And this is something I really can't put into like data to show you guys other than whatever happened in that start specifically, but their best at bats of the season, especially for a lot of these guys that were really struggling, came in this start, which was the last start for Cole Irvin, where find his overall stats just to bring him up real quick. But he only gave up one run, which was surprising because the Rays left a lot of base runners on base, but they hit him up hard. 8 hits or 2 runs, sorry, but 8 hits, 2 runs, and 6 in the third. So they had plenty of base runners. The strand rate was absolutely outrageous. They just didn't hit with runners in scoring position, which was tough. But yeah, they struck early, had nothing really in between here. Then Jose Caballero got a home run late in the game to get that second earned run. But a lot of these guys, when I'm just talking about like Randy looked much better in his approach. Jose Siri, this is kind of in the middle of where he's starting to hit really good against left-handed pitching. Yandy for the first time looked alive. Even like Austin Jackson, or Alex Jackson, who I don't even get me started on this guy, potentially worst hitter in the bigs, but I would say his 3 best at-bats of the season all came in this game against Cole Irvin. So there's something that the Rays lineup sees about Cole Irvin. It sees in Cole Irvin's pitch mix that they sat on really, really well, and they didn't quite strike as much as they should have in that first matchup. I think they do today. So I feel I'm in love with the Rays bats in this spot. I see a Cole Irvin very weird 2.5 earned run square on Prize Picks as well. No Harold Ramirez is going to be the lineup today. They just DFA'd him. Maybe you see Taylor Walls, who's been really good against lefties. It's the one thing he does well. So added little bonus there, but I think this is a great spot for the Rays bats, and I'm going to continue turning a corner and starting to back them against left-handed pitching now, and I think that's the start of it. So I do think they win this game. I'd be on them, be on their bats pretty heavy. Don't know what the story is for the Orioles the rest of this series, pitching-wise. You're probably going to see Bradish on Saturday, I would think. That's another guy that they sneakily saw well. Same goes for Taj Bradley, though. The Orioles tapped him up. That was the game over the weekend last Saturday that, soared in the first couple of innings. You saw a lot of runs. The starters really, really struggled. So maybe expecting a little bit of the same. I'm getting a vibe of runs from this series, especially, I always get that feeling once you're seeing the same pitchers for the second time in a week. But this series specifically, it felt like these lineups had a really good read on a couple of these pitchers. Mostly being Cole Irvin and Bradish from the Rays, and then Taj Bradley and a little bit of Zach Littell at points for the Orioles. So I think there's going to be some runs in this series in the Trop, which is rare. Also rare that you see 8 to 8.5 total in the Trop, which is exactly what you see now in game one. So start the train. I think the Rays bats explode in game one. And then we'll see how both teams are able to rebound in the Saturday and Sunday games of the series. I think this will be an exciting series to watch. I think the Rays steal one here. I haven't looked at the potential series price now that this is getting recorded a little later, so we can actually take a look at the series price. I assume it's going to get me a little excited. Yeah, Orioles only slight favorites is pretty exciting. I like that. That's pretty exciting. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Rays bats, in love with them game one against Cole Irvin. We'll see if that comes to bite me in the ass. But we move. Dodgers Yankees series that a lot of you guys wanted to hear me talk about at depth, which as of right now, it's pretty tough because Juan Soto, I would assume he's not going to play in the series, and that makes it extremely difficult because I've been pounding the drum, which again, not super hot take or anything, but people act like this Yankees offense is incredible top to bottom. It's not. It's actually really bad once you get to the second half of the lineup. It's been carried by the Volpe hit streak, Judge being at absolute ridiculous MVP pace, and Soto right there with him. So when you take Soto out of that lineup, that's a bigger omission than people would realize. Not saying people underestimate Juan Soto, but I think people overestimate what the rest of that lineup can do. So let me position it with this first of all. This is Dodgers Yankees. I would say this is the biggest series we've had in the regular season of baseball in a decade. So, are you going to see juice balls, especially when all these teams or all these games are going to be on national television? Yeah, you probably are. But it's so tough to get a read on this Yankees offense without Soto because we've already seen this when both of them are in the lineup, Judge and Soto. Like teams will pitch around them. The Angels actually did that really, really well. You pitch around them. If you have a good matchup against Stanton or Verdugo or whoever, you don't really have to worry about them because none of them are really consistently that good to make you concerned. So now with just, Volpe, Judge, and we'll see if Soto comes back like at some point during the series. I have a feeling he might hit the IL, which would suck. But if he's not there, Judge is probably not getting much to hit in this series, and it's going to be up to the back end of that Yankees lineup, which is a tough ask, especially against a guy in game one like Yamamoto or in game three like a Glass now. But I do think there will be runs in the series. I'm a little weary to take it game one because I do think Yamamoto can dice them up. Cody Petit has actually been really, really good too. They've called him up when needed. Just had that emergency spot start with Clark Schmidt going on the IL against the Giants, and he was solid. Home run ball may be a problem. So yeah, I would say I definitely lean the Yankees just making it happen because I don't think anybody thinks they can in this series, especially game one with Poteet. Then Nestor Cortez, who has superpowers at home, gets to face the Dodgers lineup that he can really mix up, I think, especially at the top there. You talk about how he messes with timing and everything. A lot of those guys at the top of that lineup, whether it's Mookie, whether it's Freddie, whether it's Shohei, they get thrown off against a lot of that stuff, especially lefty-lefty, which two of the guys are. So I do think as much as I'm harping on the Yankees end of the lineup being a problem, it's the same story with the Dodgers, obviously. And they're a little better against lefties. They find their spots. So like Nestor, maybe the bottom of the lineup picks up against them, but I can't see it against Luis Gil. I mean, that game is Sunday Night Baseball, Glasnow versus Luis Gil in game 3 of this series. As much as I think the juice baseballs may be in play there, it's tough to have any belief in that Dodgers lineup, especially against Luis Gil. He's just been downright fantastic. No holes in his game. Maybe he's going to get hit with like a Shota blow up tight start at some point, but I'm not sure it's in that start. So slight lean to the Yankees in game one, I would say with Poteet, probably not enough to play it. Maybe going to go for an over in game 2. And then Yankees probably game 3 to close out the series. That's kind of what my thoughts say. Again, the overarching narrative that I can't get out of my head, if you guys heard me talk about last weekend, Judge was going back to San Francisco, his hometown, and the team that thought they were getting him for I don't know how long that lasted, but they thought they were getting him. Arson Judge tweet, hilarious. So you just kind of knew he was going to terrorize them in that series and go yard a couple of times, and he had one of the greatest series I think we've seen from any player in I don't know how long. But I mean, the obvious one here is this is the first time. I mean, we have Dodgers Yankees, of course, first time they've been this good, playing each other since whenever. Shohei, he's played in Yankee Stadium a couple times. The first time as a member of the super team Dodgers. Everybody's going to be there. You have wind blowing out in game one. I assume it's going to be decent weather, at least for game two and game three. You think he ain't taking a 1 yard or two? Like it's an obvious narrative, and I just see the way that baseball is going to publicize this series. Again, I'm not going to act like I'm reinventing the wheel here, but Shohei's probably going to have himself a pretty good series. Whether that comes with probably comes like a 0 for 4 against Nestor Cortez in game two or something like that. But against Poteet in game one, kind of see a nuke happening. And just in the series, I think there's going to be a lot of buzz about Ohtani versus Judge, and they're probably both going to show out, and MLB might make sure that happens. So I'll be on Ohtani, probably something in game one and maybe game two. We'll see. We'll see how it works out. But yeah, that's the general vibe I'm getting. But from a matchup perspective, I would say this series probably goes Yankees over Yankees to me. Maybe the Dodgers steal game two. It is a lefty. I hate Gavin Stone though, but yeah, it's a tough series to read without Soto because I don't want to have too much confidence in the Yankees offense. I just want to see how they perform without Soto, but the juice balls are going to be in the series. What am I kidding? We can move to the next set of series. Pretty good one here. Cubs Reds. Feel like I've had a pretty good grip on the Reds for the past couple of weeks. The bats are starting to wake up. I was trying to preach that from the mountaintops. You know, they got really cold. A lot of the guys were hurt in the lineup. They're starting to get a guy or two back here and there. They're playing good baseball right now. The bats are alive. Everybody thought they would be dead coming out of first game out of Coors yesterday, but really good hitting conditions in Great American Ballpark yesterday, and it kind of showed itself, as well as, you know, seeing pitchers for the second time within a week, which I'm going to say the Reds offense is going to stay hot just in general. And there's going to be great hitting weather in Great American Ballpark for the entirety of this series, the rest of the three games, it seems like. So the one game that I guess I would slightly consider the unders tonight, but I'm not going to do it for a couple of reasons. One of them is we're seeing the same pitchers for the most part, you know, throughout the series for the same time or multiple times within a week. So I hate backing unders off of that unless it's an offense that's really, really cold, which the Cubs probably would have fit a couple days ago, but now they're starting to hit a little better. It's because they played the White Sox and the Reds in Great American Ballpark, but the conditions kind of trump everything. So I'm going to stay away from game one. I do still lean Reds. I do want to make sure Tyler Stevenson's in the lineup because he is so crucial to the Reds lineup against left-handed pitching. He got hit on the hand yesterday and I think had to leave the game. So if he can't, you know, play today, that's a big, big loss. So I do think there's going to be some offense throughout this series. Andrew Abbott's a guy who, if you face him multiple times within a week or so, he's shown the propensity to struggle the couple of times that it's happened as well. So I do think the Cubs are in a pretty good spot there. But at the same time, we saw both of these bullpens, you know, get some work over the past week or so, the Cubs especially. And they'll bring it up right here because the Cubs have had a pretty rough go of it. And it's not like their bullpen's good anyway. They're kind of like in the Royals situation where the bullpen is just so bad. It's not like crazy saying to fade them necessarily. Let me get Tatum off the screen, man. But Tuesday and Wednesday, a lot of work. Yesterday, they kind of used bulk-ish guys. They brought Hodge, Little, and Hendricks in. And, you know, they gave up a bunch of runs. So when we see, I don't know, the Wesneski, I don't know when we're going to see him particularly. It might be, I guess it's probably going to be the Ben Brown start. So maybe they go Brown, then bulk Wesneski. So they're probably saving him. So if there's any situation in this series specifically where I've said this, I think last series, and I said it when we were talking about a PTL, there's always late BS in these series against the bullpens. It's been because like both of these bullpens have been so bad for like the past couple of years. The Reds throughout the season has not been great. It's starting to get much, much better. So I want to keep buying them, but the Cubs has not really changed. So late inning magic for the Reds. They've had it the last couple of games. They're going to continue to have it throughout this series. I do think they can cause some problems for Justin Steele. I'm not sure just how many yet. But we're talking about that, you know, Ben Brown, Wesneski bulk start. That's a problem. We'll see what Shota can do because Shota, like I talked about, And the White Sox start, he's a fly ball pitcher. That's the one situation where I really, really worried about him. And the second we saw it in a Wrigley win game, he didn't do well against the White Sox. And it's not a Wrigley win game now, but it's a really, really good hitting situation in Great American Ballpark, it seems to be. So, as much as I would love in any other situation to say bounce back start for Shota, there's going to be a lot of strikeouts in this Reds lineup. You can probably say that's not a safe bet, but maybe the better bet there. I do think they can score some runs off of him. And Frankie Montas is coming off of a, no hit bid into the seventh inning in Coors. So I do think there's room for runs throughout this whole series. Definitely want to target it in that game 3 between Brown and Abbott, probably the most. Other than that, maybe I like the Cubs, towards the end on that Sunday game with Shota. I do think he's better, just don't know how much. Definitely love fading guys off of, perfect game, no hit bids, and the Shota stock may be as low as it ever gets off of those back-to-back starts. Who knows? But yeah, those are my thoughts there. Definitely buy stock into some offense in that series because I will be continuing to do so. Guardians, Marlins, Logan Allen, Ryan Weathers. If you've listened to me talk about the Guardians any bit, I'm not a Logan Allen fan. I like fading him a lot. And if you look at, what he's been able to do or not do this season, you would understand a little more why. He's just been downright disappointing. He was an arm that I think a lot of people kind of expected to take that next step for them. They got some young arms. They've won some games with him, but he's still sitting there, 5.83. Look at all these numbers. God awful. Hard hit rate is especially where I love to target him. Now, I will say, like the Marlins, not my favorite fade for him because the Marlins are almost in that Nationals discussion where this is since May 1st, 27th against left-handed pitching. They're downright terrible. So it's a tough sell. I do think they get to him, though. Like the Marlins do hit the ball hard at times. It usually doesn't come against lefties, but I do also want to buy into Ryan Weathers. Talked about this last time. He didn't have the greatest start last time, but he's pitched to a 3.41 ERA. He's keeping the ball on the ground. The Guardians are going to hit it on the ground. And he's just been solid. Used the fastball a lot. So like he's relied on his strikeouts a little bit too much, which may be a problem against the Guardians, but I don't know. This game to me is just screaming it's going to be really weird. It's like I have a reason or two on either side to not feel confident about taking the Marlins in this spots. Namely, it would be the Guardians are good against lefties. They're not going to strike out. Ryan Weathers is going to have to alter some things, and then the Marlins aren't good against left-handed pitching. But I think in this specific situation, I'm willing to bypass a couple of those things because I want to buy stock in Ryan Weathers. Like I said, he's had a couple of really good starts. Other than the Rangers, where he kind of settled down after a while, still had 11 strikeouts, but gave up 4 runs. Before that, he's been on a run of really good starts here. So I do think he can settle down and have a good start against the Guardians. I do think their offense, especially when they're on the road and outside of the stadium that's turned into a wind tunnel, I do think they're a little susceptible to bagels. So give me Ryan Weathers in the start. Bullpen scares you a little bit for the Marlins. It always does, but I do think they steal one. If we want to talk about spots to absolutely be fading the Marlins, I do think, as much as I don't like Carlos Carrasco, it's probably that start on Sunday because the lefty that I'm more than willing to go down and fade to the grave is Trevor Rogers. And like we talked about, the Guardians are good against left-handed pitching. So I'm willing to throw it out for Weathers. I'm not willing to throw it out for Trevor Rogers because Trevor Rogers has been, if you want to talk about Logan Allen being bad, I guess Trevor Rogers, people really don't talk about nearly as much because the expectations aren't there. They kind of expect him to be bad, even though he had a flash in the pan for one season. He plays for the Marlins, so nobody really cares. But 1-7, 5.68 ERA, hard hit rate, worse than Logan Allen. Strikeout stuff is gone. Velocity's gone. Expected stats awful. So this is the guy that I think the Guardians absolutely destroy if we're talking about left-handed pitching. So Guardians team total will probably be on the card. Again, I don't love Carlos Carrasco, so maybe an over in that game is just what I'll stick with. But I think at the very least, that game 3, the Guardians bats are going to come to play against Trevor Rogers. So that's probably one of my one of my favorite just destruction spots of the weekend that I'm very, very down to get involved in. Little getaway game destruction for Trevor Rogers from the Guardians. So that'll be my thoughts on those series or this series. We can go back to Texas, which it's hard to really have thoughts on the Saturday and Sunday games here because we don't have pitchers there yet. But I'll tell you my thoughts. Game 1, Logan Webb. We all kind of know at this point. It's no secret. Logan Webb on the road, not nearly as good. He loses his superpowers against really anybody when he faces on the road. It's confusing. A lot of pitchers have home road splits, but he seemed to have like really dramatic ones from really the start of his career. Like if you're looking 4.34, which is actually on its way down, but 4.34 on the road, 1.71 at home. He is just dominant at home, but when he gets on the road, he throws Turks. And it is a little confusing, I'll say, to look at this Rangers team right now because, as we're speaking right now, I don't know Corey Seager's status. I would feel a lot more confident getting in and fading Logan Webb if Corey Seager was in the lineup. And even if he's going to be in the lineup, who knows how healthy he's going to be. But, I do still think they have a little life in this matchup. I don't love Michael Lorenzen. The Giants have been tricky against right-handed pitching. So I think he can hold his own in that matchup, maybe not have a spot-free outing, but Logan Webb, who is also, I believe, coming off of a little extra rest, that was brought to my attention by a couple people as well, where he hasn't been nearly as good. It might be tough. He did have like a couple Turks he threw against the Yankees, but overall, I would say he did as much as he could in that outing with 2 MVP candidates that he was facing and Aaron Judge on an absolute mission. So going on the road to Texas, an offense that I think is starting to heat up just the slightest bit, I do think he runs into a little bit of trouble. So stick with that. That can't have, many thoughts on the rest of the series. Don't know pitchers, but do you think the Rangers could get right in the series? We can go to Kansas City. I talked about the series when it was in Seattle. I thought the Mariners pitching staff was going to stuff the Royals in the locker, partially for how they matched up, but partially for, the fact that it's in Seattle, which is pitcher's paradise. Now this one's in Kansas City, where I think we could see more runs, but I think it's going to come from the Mariners' bats. Lucky for them, the first couple starts of the series, the first couple games of the series, they get to see, first of all, I guess I can frame it with this, which if you haven't heard me talk about this, listen now, because I'm saying it again. The Royals bullpen is very, very bad. They were enough to keep them above water, keep them treading water at the beginning of the season. Now they're bad again. And not only that, they had no off day coming into this. They had Brady Singer, who struggled, only went 70 pitches. They had to use a lot of their bullpen yesterday. You see all of these guys pitching who are very bad, and this was the rare good outing from them. They were nearly spotless from this outing. So you know what's coming after this. They're going to toss turkeys in this matchup and against the Mariners. So I really think, first of all, you're starting this with a tired Mariners bullpen or tired Royals bullpen that's already bad, and you have Daniel Lynch starting today, which the Mariners match up much better against left-handed pitching. And Daniel Lynch used to be a guy that could give them pretty solid innings, but I'm not sure that he's gotten to that level yet this season because they've just brought him up when they needed him. I'm going to bring up his numbers so far, which he's actually been like decent in the times they brought him in. But you look at how long he's gone, like he hasn't eclipsed 5 innings. He's only gone, 2 actual starts. So I think his ceiling's at about 5 innings. So you're going to see that bullpen that's very, very tired and bad for probably longer than you'd want to against a Mariners lineup that I think can match with them. So I think I like runs in this game. I will be on the Mariners specifically, partially because I do think they match up really well against Daniel Lynch, and then they're going to get into that very bad and tired bullpen early. But I kind of like Bryce Miller's matchup too. Talk about this with all the Mariners pitchers. A lot of them are much worse against lefties, and Bryce Miller has kind of fixed that by developing a splitter. So like I don't think his splits are nearly as dramatic anymore, but there's still a propensity for it there. And yeah, it's still quite there. The home run problem is still pretty pronounced. Same with walks. So when we talk about that for the Royals, it's really Vinny P and nobody else who's going to scare you from the left side. Maybe they're going to bring like sneak Michael Massey. I don't know. MJ Melendez is terrible. Adam Frazier. I give the same couple of guys every time we talk about this, but Royals are right-handed dominant. So if you have a guy that really struggles against the lefties, it doesn't hurt you all that much. Now, I do think Bryce Miller going on the road could have a little bit of trouble here, give up a Turk or two. Maybe it ends up being to Vinny P because he hasn't been fantastic on the road, like you see right here, 4.76 on the road. just 213 at home, which that's less like relying on splits. And it's more just the fact that he plays in Seattle, which is a big pitcher's park. So we're going to see decent conditions in Kansas City. I think it's hitting weather. I just think regardless of what we get from Bryce Miller in game one, I think the Mariners bats show up. A lot of home runs for them today. So I'm going to be on the Mariners in that matchup. Again, I do like Castillo, and I like the bats against Marsh in game two. And maybe the Royals bounce back with Reagan's on the bump game three. But I'll tell you what, I have a lot of trouble having confidence in the Royals bats in this series because I've seen how the Mariners pitching staff matches up with them. And, they're getting essentially what is, their A type 3 right now by the numbers in Miller, Castillo, Kirby, plus a bullpen that's, dealing with a little injury, but it's still relatively full strength. I know Munoz is kind of day to day. We'll see how they're able to utilize him, if at all. But still, I like where the bullpen's at for them. Really good series for them against the A's. So, I've seen how they match up. I think they still could shove them in a locker, but I think I'm more relying on the Mariners bats in the series, which scary to say out loud, but I like the matchups there, 100%. Can go ahead and go to the South side here. Big series, which we already saw start off with a bang in game one. The Red Sox, I think the final score is 14-2 against the White Sox. White Sox have lost, I think, 15 in a row. Crazy skid. So, they're coming into it now. Another favorite, Crochet against Criswell. Not that it's not deserving, but feels pretty indicative. Crochet is a popular pitcher today. I get that. The Red Sox have been terrible against left-handed pitching, so it's something that I have absolutely no problem leading into. Bullpens probably scare you. Maybe you see a blow up, but after scoring 14 runs, you're an underdog to the White Sox. Feels pretty telling. You do have a couple guys in the White Sox that can get the ball in the air, which is key against Cooper Criswell. So yeah, I think it's the White Sox, at least first five in this game. I think Crochet pitches well. The Red Sox still really haven't shown me much against left-handed pitching. Strikeout rate is still there. The numbers are still bad. So until they show me otherwise, I'm going to continue taking this stance. So I think everybody else is on that same wavelength, and that'll be kind of it. But rest of the series, we do get Brian Bayo against Nastrini. Nastrini, as much as I really want to believe in the stuff, it's just not there right now. He's not a major league arm. So I do think the Red Sox, they've been hot. Maybe they run into a little blip, against Garrett Crochet, which is absolutely excusable. They're probably going to destroy Nick Nastrini in game two. Another one that feels just very square blow-up spot that I'm 100% willing to buy into. Probably going to be some home runs off of them. Strikeout stuff is not there. Oh, I guess I don't have it up, but strikeout stuff is not there. 9.74 ERA, walk rate. He's going to put plenty of guys on base. It's probably going to get ugly. And Brian Bayo, heavy split guys, like maybe a couple of the White Sox lefties give him trouble, like a Gavin Sheets. That's probably a game you can pretty confidently back runs, I would say, if it ends up being this pitching matchup. But yeah, the Dodgers, or not the Dodgers. I see the Dodgers up here throwing me off, but the Red Sox are probably going to destroy him in that game. I don't know if the 1.5 is going to be at a bettable range, but if it is, I'm going to bet it. So that's my thoughts there. Don't know who's pitching for them against Flexen, but Flexen's been kind of good. So for game three, not my favorite fade anyway. Can move to the next set of the series. Rockies Cards might be a snooze fest of a series. We already saw that in game one, even though the Rockies won. Everybody was big on Sonny Gray, and I understood why. But I think this is just a series of unders when you see the good arms on the mound, which it seems like we're going to get that today with, Gomber has been weirdly really good. He's had his problems with lefties, so I could see a Nolan Gorman bomb, who's he's been very Bonds as of late, but I think he has an overall solid outing. Lance Lynn is just going to try to overpower the Rockies, and I think that's going to be relatively fine. I'd say I still kind of lean Rockies in this game, but I think the under would be the better play, the preferred play for me. I do think Gibson can pitch really, really well against this Rockies lineup. Just a veteran's approach that works well. We've seen it time and time again with, guys like Frankie Montas, who just did this in course. So I do think that's a really good start for Gibson. Feltner, it's hard to trust, but maybe that's just a Cardinal spot, not so much the under. Ty Block, I think he can have a solid start too, as scary as it sounds. He's been really, really good as of late. Just had his first blip in a couple starts against the Reds in Coors, which again, Reds are red hot, no pun intended. hitting well against lefties right now. I thought they matched up really well. I took the over in that game. I don't think the Cardinals are quite the same. I do think they can score a little bit off them, but as far as matchups against lefties that pitch like he does, it's not my favorite matchup. And same goes for Palante on the other side. That's kind of a pitching matchup that I think is all right, maybe sneaky under, but I feel a little stronger about the under that we see in game 2 of this series between Gomber and Lynn, and then probably back into Cardinals and Kyle Gibson in game 3 of this series, and probably keep me off of that block Palante starts or block Palante matchup, and then we can move from there. Yeah, Astros Angels. This series, I have a tough time with because it's already happened. Sure, they've seen these pitchers. I would love to continue backing the Astros bats to do well, but the Angels, the way they play and the way they pitch, a lot of these lineups, it just tends to be these low-scoring slugfest games. We saw it with the Padres. Not their offense is fantastic, but you get my point. We saw it with the Yankees, who they have two of the hottest hitters in the league right now. In that lineup, they shut them down for a majority of that series. So I'm a little hesitant. So like I can't stand Griffin Koenig as far as pure profiling goes. On paper, he should get destroyed by the Astros. I think Jordan does a number on him tonight. But outside of that, like we have a Bregman and Tucker that have been dealing with injuries. Are they going to be in the lineup? Are they not? Who knows? Jake Myers, I think, is a good matchup to look for tonight too. But it's tricky because like even between not just the Koenig start, but like the Tyler Anderson start, he's pitched them well, but they've seen him a bunch. Patrick Sandoval, same deal. It's tricky. It's almost Yankees-ish in a sense that like they're not missing a guy like Soto. They might be missing like a Bregman or Tucker one of these games or more, but you don't really know. You don't know how healthy they are. So it's tricky to say with full confidence that you can go on this matchup and you just know they're going to be in a smash spot. So yeah, ideally, I would think they're a really good matchup against Canning. I know Jordan does. That's the one I'll be dying on tonight. And then Patrick Sandoval has just been god awful, and they've seen him plenty. So that should be a good spot for the bats. I don't know if I want to get down the Anderson Hill just because he's been the guy to fade all season and hasn't really shown it. So from the Astros bats perspective, I'm a little nervous to get involved in this series. I'll say that. But from the pitching side of things, Framber is a lefty. The Angels have seen lefties really, really well over the past couple months or the past month. Maybe he'll start to regress at some point because they're doing it with guys like Kevin Pillar, like Logan O'Hoppe, I like, of course, but some guys that I think are hitting against lefties a little bit over their head. So maybe it comes to an end. Framber got blown up the first time. Maybe it doesn't happen again, but the pitcher that I would love to buy in the long term is definitely Hunter Brown. The strikeout stuff is going to be there. The Angels have shown like a little life early in games against right-handed pitchers the last couple, I don't know, games they faced like top-tier arms like Dylan Cease. They had a couple home runs off of him early in the game. Then he settled down. They didn't score after that. Single run in the game. I can see that happening to Hunter Brown. He gives up like a solo shot at the beginning, maybe two, settles down. The strikeout stuff I think is going to be there for him in the long term. That's starting to pick up. So I do like a really solid Hunter Brown start against the Angels. And probably a Verlander bounce back too because he was bad. But other than that, that's a tricky series to get involved in. Almost as tricky as this D-backs Padres one that I truthfully want no involvement in whatsoever. Matt Waldron has been Cy Young. I see him slated for game 2 against Ryan Nelson, who he just had a good start. We backed him. He was at home and had a rare good start. Now he's going on the road, but yeah, that feels like a better pitching matchup than most people give it credit for. Probably going to be pretty corp though. So as much as I want to get involved in this series, and I say that I don't know why, because I really don't. I just think I'm good. I don't think anybody requested that one in the comments, so I think I'm going to leave off of that one. Probably the same here with this Blue Jays A series. The Blue Jays are starting to taper off a little bit against left-handed pitching. Now, the way their lineup kind of sets up and profiles, they should destroy Hogan Harris, who they're going to see in game 1. I have no confidence that they will. So if it was any other team but the Blue Jays and everything was the same, and I saw this lineup with these matchups against Hogan Harris, I would take it, and I would back their bats in some way. I just can't do it. So, Bassett, I feel like he always goes back to Oakland and pitches very well. Could be totally making that up. I want to look that up real quick so I'm not spewing bullshit, but I feel like I've seen Bassett a couple of times go back to face the A's, and he's looked pretty solid. I do like his matchup just for I don't know, just baseline purposes. Let's look at his numbers in 2023. I assume he faced them as of recently, sometime in there. Yeah, that's probably the start that I was remembering. Late last year, eight eight innings, 1 run, stuff like that. Then there's one up here. Got touched up a little bit in this start. 5 innings, 4 runs. Yeah. So I do like his matchup. I don't love it. Definitely think Gosman can bounce back. The A's have been tricky. Just a tricky team to figure out because they've been pesky in some spots. Gosman's been bad, especially against lefties. The righties for the A's are starting to heat up, but the lefties are still the lefties. So maybe that's the bounce back spot. I really don't know what you're getting from Luis Medina or Mitch Spence. Mitch Spence was not great last time out, but he gave them enough. Medina, I believe, is coming back into the rotation. Maybe it's in the plans for him to stay there. I don't quite know. So yeah, keep me off of this series entirely. Would not be surprised to get a Gosman bounce back start though. That's kind of where my head lies, but you never really know with that guy, and it's pretty tough. And then the last one, another one that's difficult to talk about, but everybody wants to hear about it. It's a London series. For anybody who's not quite familiar, smaller fields, going to get high totals, just like we got in the Mexico City games, just for, completely different reasons. So this Mets team sneakily, I know we do have Ranger Suarez on the mound, and I don't fade Ranger Suarez in this household. But the Mets are starting to hit a little better against left-handed pitching. And early on in the season, it was that they were decent against left-handed pitching, but they really didn't strike out. So they at least put the ball in place. Like it took a couple under strikeouts or for strikeout dominant pitchers. That's where I got involved really. But now it's always weird when teams or when players go to London because especially for pitchers, they're super routine oriented and they're taken out of that. And Ranger just got drilled with a liner in this game, and he's not missing a start because of it, but because of like the whole trip, he is, I guess, thrown off and given a little like extra 2 days of rest, if my math is correct, maybe 3. So that's the part that gives me a little hope about the Mets hitting up Ranger Suarez. Again, I don't know like what the totals are going to be at quite for this game. Because we're not seeing those markets open just yet. I don't believe. I can check just to make sure. Oh, actually we are. We are. Let's take a look. Maybe not for those games, but I see some for the rest of the games on the slates. That's kind of tough. But yeah, we'll see. Those totals are going to be high, maybe artificially high. So I don't know if I'm going to go chasing it over in the first game. But I do think the silver lining here, like I talked about, Mets are better against left-handed pitching as of late, started to pick it up. Ranger just got drilled by a line drive. Now he's on a couple days extra rest going to London. So for pitchers, routine is all thrown off. So I don't fade Ranger Suarez in this house. I really don't want to. Kind of getting the feeling that I should. Might stay off. Don't know. Very indecisive about this game. I'll figure out what I'm doing. Maybe I'll keep up with my Twitter or whatever. But I wouldn't feel super confident about Ranger Suarez in this start. That's my takeaway of it. Sean Manaea on the other side can easily get turked as well. And then we're going to see Quintana against Walker. I don't fade Ranger Suarez in this house, but you know who I do fade? I do fade Taijuan Walker because that guy is downright terrible. So if the Mets don't come up with really anything in game 1, I do think it's, especially, if we see an under with everybody on the over, trying to take the London series, whatever, game 1. Taijuan Walker is going to serve Turks against this Mets lineup. So I would be 100% down to get involved in that, more so than, fading Ranger Suarez. But I think the Mets have life in this series, 100%. I think it's going to be a really weird series. The Phillies are, they were red hot, started to cool down a little bit. Now they're going to London kind of in the middle of their cool down streak. They've still been good. Don't get me wrong, but it kind of feels like a weird Mets spot. You got a 2-game set. Maybe they catch a split. But if they somehow eke out game 1 against Ranger Suarez, which I think it's more of a possibility than people give it credit for, I love fading Taijuan Walker when he has a matchup like that. So that's it's probably going to wrap it up for this episode of the series preview. Again, like doing the weekend ones. It helps you guys, or helps me as much as it helps you guys get ready for the weekend. So we're not waking up on a Saturday morning, hungover at 12:30 in the afternoon, having to get in the lab. You can just push buttons. You kind of are prepared for it. So again, keep up with the Twitter. Make sure you guys let me know what you want to hear from these going forward. I always ask for which games you want me to key in on. I feel like I did a decent job of that today at the very least. And yeah, show some love, like up the video, comment, see comments. Appreciate you guys showing the love. Good luck on your bets. Let's have a weekend, and W's for everybody for a good week so far.